news, everyone! There have been several milestones along my journey as a scientist that I've shared with you on social media, but today I'd like to share an extra special milestone with you. And there's even more good news to look forward to! This video is part of a good news themed large group collaborative playlist with other members of We Create EDU, a group of educational YouTubers. So check out the playlist for a whole bunch of good news videos to put more happy in your day. So what's my good news? Let me give you a little bit of background information first. In the summers of 2017 and 2018, I did field work here at the Naturalist grasslands in northwestern Illinois. I was collecting dung beetles using the pitfall trap method I recently explained in a video. After collecting all of those bugs, I sorted and measured them in the lab, gathering mounds of data that I then analyzed in a computer program called R. And all along during the time of this process, I was also reading papers written by other people who had also studied dung beetles. In the spring of 2019, I combined all of my data with the knowledge I'd accumulated from reading all of those papers, and I wrote my master's thesis. It's a document I'm very proud of, and if you've been a fan of this channel for a while, then you'll remember that I actually did a live stream of my master's thesis defense, which you can still watch on this channel if you want to hear me talk in scientific jargon for an hour. After my thesis was accepted by my committee and I graduated with my master's degree, my advisor and I spent some time adding data and rewriting portions of my thesis to turn it into a manuscript. And a few months ago, I submitted that manuscript to a scientific journal for consideration for publication. Okay, so here's where we get to the good news. The journal reviewed my manuscript, and I've just completed revisions on it. This does not mean that my paper has been accepted for publication yet, but it is really good news because it means I'm getting very close to that point. I wanted to talk about the process of submitting and revising my manuscript because I don't think the scientific community does a great job of explaining the peer review process to people who don't participate in it. Why do I think it's important for you to know how the peer review process works? Well, for one thing, the peer review process is vital to science because research that's gone through peer review is usually more trustable. So when you see information about nutrition or the environment or COVID-19, it's good to check to see if your source cites any peer-reviewed journal articles. And this is going to sound like a contradiction, but the peer review process is also one of the places where we can see the flaws in the scientific process and in the scientific community as a whole. Let's do the positive parts first. The peer review process strengthens scientific papers, making them more worthwhile to the community and more trustable. I uploaded my original manuscript to the scientific journal's website, and then an associate editor took a look at it and decided it was worth further review. If my science and/or my writing had been really bad, the associate editor could have done what's called a desk rejection and sent it back to me without any review. But since the editor liked my paper enough to keep it for consideration, they then contacted other scientists who the editor thought would have opinions on my paper or would otherwise be able to provide a helpful review. These scientists are probably experts on dung beetles or restoration ecology or some other subjects relevant to my paper. These reviewers, in my case there were two, read the manuscript and provided comments and feedback. The associate editor then took the comments and feedback and made a decision. For my manuscript, the decision was rejection with an invitation to resubmit. That sounds bad, right? Well, even though the word rejection sounds really scary, what this actually means is that there were some things that needed to be fixed or changed about my manuscript, but if we made those changes, then the journal would be interested in considering my manuscript for publication. The big changes I was asked to make were things that strengthened the overall science of my paper, which is why I said the peer review process is so important for science. The reviewers noted that I needed to adjust the dataset I was using slightly and rerun all of my analyses, and they also suggested an extra analysis that I should run. All of these things meant that my final conclusions and the whole paper were much stronger. The reviewers also asked me to add a few extra citations to my paper to further support my arguments. So as you can see, all of these changes actually made my paper better, which means that it will be more useful to other people in the community researching dung beetles, and that my conclusions and arguments are more trustable overall. But while we're here, I think it's important to take a moment to examine some of the negative aspects of the peer review process. I don't mean to sound like a wet blanket. I want to say again that my first experience with the peer review process was really positive. It's just that I think it's important for us to continually interrogate our systems and not put too much trust in them without asking how we could make them better. My first gripe is kind of a silly one, but it's also kind of silly that we have to talk about this. The peer review process is intended to make scientific papers stronger and better, so usually peer reviewers are expected to focus on the science of a paper. But it seems to be a chronic problem that some peer reviewers take it upon themselves to become copy editors, and their reviews will be full of comments like, add a comma on line 278, or remove the article A on line 300, or whatever. While these fixes are easy to make, it can be really annoying if a review is full of them. And the tendency for some peer reviewers to become copy editors is especially problematic when we consider how many researchers, especially young and early career researchers, might be English as a second language individuals. This can include exchange students, immigrants, and African American vernacular English speakers. Policing the grammar or writing of these individuals is a form of gatekeeping that can make them feel like they don't belong in the scientific community, even if the content of their papers is really good. And unfortunately, the gatekeeping doesn't stop there. The peer review process is typically a one-way mirror, where the reviewers know the names of the manuscript authors, but the authors have no idea who the reviewers are. This was true in my case. I can make some educated guesses about who I think the reviewers might have been, but the journal editor didn't tell me who they were, and neither of the reviewers signed their review, so I can't be sure. Anonymity on the reviewer's end is meant to promote honest reviews, which I totally get, but when the authors of a manuscript are known to a reviewer, both conscious and unconscious biases can wind up affecting the process. For example, I have a female presenting first name, and this manuscript will be my first author publication. So from these few details, a reviewer might assume that I'm female, I'm young, and I'm new to the field. None of those assumptions would be incorrect, but they can be problematic. If the reviewer doesn't think women belong in science, or they have some sort of bias against young or early career researchers, they could write a review so scathing that my manuscript is rejected from publication. Stuff like this can and does happen all the time. This is bad because it means some people have a much harder time publishing than others. A person shouldn't struggle to publish their science because reviewers don't like their female or ethnic presenting name or something else about them as a person. The peer review process needs to be double-blind to promote science over personal biases. So yeah, I hope my description of scientific peer review was enlightening for those of you unfamiliar with the process. I think it's important for all of us to know this stuff so that we can read peer-reviewed science with our eyes open. I was also really glad to get to share my good news with you. Stay tuned on my social media platforms. I promise I will let you know as soon as my paper is published. And if you'd like to hear some more good news today, don't forget to check out the good news themed large group collaborative playlist from WeCreate.edu. The group is full of educational content creators who make great videos, so please go give them a watch. If you liked this video, don't forget to like it. If you didn't like this video, please share it with someone who would. And if you'd like to support the Roving Naturalist, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon. Then go check out my Patreon page. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you like science and tabletop role-playing games, you should definitely check out my Nature Check project on Twitch. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.